Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order for the day. First item on our agenda is approval of today's agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Employee recognitions. Where are they? Kathy McCain. Presented in grateful recognition of 15 years of outstanding and dedicated service to Clay County and its citizens. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it.
She wants to give a speech, I suppose.
She wanted her tickets to Hawaii. Darren Schenk. Morning, Darren. Morning. This is presented to you in grateful recognition of 15 years of outstanding and dedicated service to Clay County and its citizens. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is Commendable Service Award, Sheriff Berquist.
Thank you for giving us a little time here today to present this award. I'm going to have Lieutenant Steve Todd read it. He did nominate Deputy Lee for this award.
Morning.
Morning.
On July 7th, 2015, Deputy Jeff Lee was working in his assignment with the Metro Street Crimes Unit. He was partnered with Fargo Police Officer Brent Halverson, and they were patrolling the Romkey Park neighborhood in an unmarked squad car. Both officers had their attention drawn to a group of males in the parking lot of the former Culture Center in the 1000 block of 19th Street South. The officers positioned their squad car in a location to observe this group of men. When it began appearing some type of disturbance was starting amongst the group. Deputy Lee started to reposition the squad car for a better view when Officer Halverson observed one of the males pointing a handgun at some of the others. Deputy Lee needed to drive around the building to get closer to the scene, and while they were out of view, a gunshot was fired. As soon as Lee and Halverson had the males back in their sight, they were able to view gun smoke in the air near the subject with the gun. Halverson also observed the male with the gun pistol whip one of the victims. Lee drove the unmarked squad into a closer position, and both he and Halverson got out and yelled for the suspects to stop and get on the ground. Two of the suspects fled east between apartment garages. Both were observed to have been armed with handguns. Lee and Halverson were unsure of the relationship between the persons present. They secured the persons remaining on scene and broadcast detailed descriptions of the fleeing suspects and a vehicle possibly connected to the suspects. Multiple law enforcement officers converged on the scene and received complete information from Deputy Lee and Officer Halverson. Because of the detailed descriptions and direction of travel information broadcast by Lee and Halverson, both suspects were captured within an hour after the incident unfolded. Two 9mm handguns that the suspects had tossed were also located. One of the handguns was found loaded with a partially full magazine just feet from the 20th Street sidewalk and only a block from the busy Romkey Park pool. Investigation revealed that this was a narcotics transaction that had turned into an armed robbery and felony assault. Both suspects are in custody, and both firearms are in law enforcement evidence rooms. Because of the Metro Street Crimes Unit officers being in the right place at the right time, they were able to stop a serious assault from occurring. This could very likely have prevented a homicide from occurring, as a shot had already been fired at one of the victims. Both officers contributed to providing crucial detailed descriptions of the suspects, the firearms, and the direction of flight. This information led to successful capture of the suspects by other officers. Both officers maintained the crime scene until relieved by the Moorhead police detectives. Deputy Jeff Lee and Officer Brent Halverson distinguished themselves with performance that exemplifies the goals, values, and mission of our department. They are a credit to the departments that they serve, as well as the Metro Street Crimes Unit. Due to their performance during this incident, I am nominating Jeff Lee for the Commendable Service Award through our agency. Thank you.
Congratulations, Deputy Lee, great work. Appreciate your work. Thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes of the August 18th and 25th, 2015 meetings.
So moved to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Citizens to be heard. Any citizens that would like to be heard other than on any item that is not on our agenda for the day? Seeing none, approved payment of bills and vouchers.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Request to fill detox program director position. Kathy. We want to get this in before your trip to Hawaii?
Yes, I hope so. I'm sure the tickets are in her office tonight.
Yeah. You're right, and since I don't have an office here, they are, so,
As you can see, I've received a resignation from the detox program manager. She's looking for another opportunity in our public health agency, so I will need a full-time detox director to fill that position. And there's certain requirements that are statutorily listed, so I will need to advertise externally for that. And that, of course, is already budgeted. It's a requirement to run our detox.
and that has to be a registered nurse?
Yeah, with a, yep,
Right, okay.
baccalaureate degree.
Wayne?
Move to approve advertising for the position. And after a second, Kathy, could you just take a moment to mention that this just is in Moorhead, public health, about filling detox positions?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Kathy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was mentioning that we did receive an email from another detox program that was asking about our ability to recruit and retain employees in the detox program, as this program also has a revolving door, very challenging, and wondering if they could have some advice from us. And ours, of course, you know, is a revolving door. So I think it was interesting to hear that this is kind of across the state, that there is always an issue in retaining employees in this program.
Well, good luck in filling it. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appointment of County Veteran Service Officer, Brian Berg.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chair and fellow commissioners. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you an individual that a couple of you have met before, but I discussed background, a little bit of Mr. Cannon earlier in a meeting, and it's my pleasure today to introduce to you personally retired Major Curtis Cannon, and hope that you strongly will consider appointing him as your next Veteran Service Officer. We had, I think, an extensive interview process and background investigation and different things for the position. Two of you have served on that and probably will add some comments, but we found his background in the medical field very supportive to what is needed in that office. We found his leadership ability in his service arena has led to a strong position or qualities for this position, and I'd like you to considering appointing Mr. Cannon as the next Veteran Service Officer for Clay County.
Thank you. Kevin, you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was fortunate to be on that interview committee this time around again, and I think we had 9 people on our panel.
Yeah, we did.
And which I mentioned before, and Curtis just seemed to rise to the top, I think, on everyone in our committee. And I know we have some of our committee members that volunteered to be on that committee here, and maybe they want to say something too. on Curtis's behalf, but you really rose to the top, and we're glad to have you sitting here today.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, you mentioned medical background. Could you take a moment to talk about that?
I enlisted as a 91 Bravo medical specialist in '89.
Okay, what does that mean to somebody like you?
It's like a EMT
Okay.
in civilian. And then I went on to serve as an officer in the Medical Service Corps.
Okay, thank you very much.
I do have a nursing degree, but I can't fill that job that she just requested.
Okay, well, I wanted to thank Bonnie and Jennifer and Jeff for helping out while we were trying to fill this position, and Jim for serving on our selection committee, and we're excited to have you on board, Kurt. It's an important position for the county, and I think I speak for the county board when I say that. We're all very committed to our veterans in Clay County, and we're looking forward to having you on board and working with them and our service clubs and the VA and everybody else involved. So thank you. We need a motion for this, correct?
Yes, you do.
I'd move to appoint Curtis Cannon as our Clay County Veteran Service Officer.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anybody that would like to say something before we approve our motion? No, hearing none. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for the
Glad to have you.
opportunity.
So you realize Bonnie runs the
Thank you,
show.
Jeff.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Oh, this. The next item is to adopt an understanding, a memorandum of understanding, a resolution allowing the change of provider of the area agency on aging services for Clay County. I think we've discussed that a little bit in the past. We've run this through different regions in the past, and it's been agreed by all the counties that are involved that this Northwest Regional Development Commission will be Clay County's provider in the future, and it's pretty much just a transition of administrative services. There won't really be any changes to probably, I guess the only change would be maybe even better services to their seniors in our county. So does anybody have any questions about that?
Jenny, you've reviewed this memorandum?
I did, yes.
So as
I'll second the resolution.
we have a motion and a second to approve the memorandum of understanding and resolution allowing for the change in provider services for the area agency on aging for Clay County. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Request by City of Barnesville for conveyance of tax forfeit property for public use. And Karen just showed up. Good timing, Karen, we're ready for you, so come on up.
Just got ready for it.
Perfect timing, so.
Yeah, we're a little early, sorry.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Karen.
How's everyone?
Good.
Good. So,
Go ahead, we're ready.
okay, great. So you received the materials that Nancy and I had provided relative to the tax forfeit property in the city of Barnesville. And I'm here before you this morning to respectfully request that the county commissioners consider allowing the Barnesville Economic Development Authority to be given this property at no cost, to allow us to, first of all, identify whatever deficiencies there are in the blighted property, make those improvements, and then turn that into a property that will generate taxes or serve the community and the public. At this point, the city and the Economic Development Authority have not made any specific decisions on how the property would be used, but we feel it's in the best interest of our residents and the residents of Clay County that we play this intermediary role with this very important property, in that it's in the main block of our downtown area. The history of this building, it's one of the historic buildings in Barnesville, and it's had a rocky last 10, 15 years. There's times, I think, where it's important for the public sector to get involved for the best long-term interest. And for a period of time, this property changed hands through the private sector. One of the problems that we saw with one of the last owners was they wished to open a business, but they didn't have the financial ability to do that. They were able to get a loan from a bank in Florida, basically, that would loan money to anyone. So the loan went bad. The bank in Florida took this property back. And then it took me about 4 years to get the bank in Florida to give it up. They did give it up to an individual who promised us that they were going to open a business in this property. Then time goes on, the property gets more and more blighted, and this is where we sit today, that he's allowed it to go tax forfeit. The building is large, which makes it difficult for the private sector really to come in and be able to financially change that into a viable business, because we do believe that there are some structural issues. So we do want to get involved. We want to make sure it's structurally intact, again, in large part because it's a part of our historic downtown. So again, for the long-term goal, first is to have a structural engineer look at it, identify what needs to be corrected, make those corrections. There's been talk about perhaps it could be a community center for Barnesville. I'm working with a church that has an interest in establishing a thrift store that would be beneficial to the church as well as to the community. So there's a variety of things that are being looked at, as well as, I note in my letter, the idea of doing like a business incubator. So we come before you today to make that request to allow that transfer to the EDA, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions for Karen?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple questions.
Yes, Jenny.
Karen, I just have a couple of concerns. I think this sounds like a fabulous idea. However, I want to make sure that we do this appropriately. And in looking at the statutes that apply, there's really two ways that a governmental entity can acquire tax forfeited property. And one is if the property is blighted, and then the entity must have specific plans for correcting the blighted conditions or developing affordable housing. And the second way would be is if the entity is going to use that property for, quote, authorized public use. And that is very limited within the statute. There's 8 definitions of what an authorized public use is. And the community center that you spoke of may fit into that authorized public use. But some of the other things you mentioned would not. And so I'm wondering, what is the theory under which you hope to acquire this property? Is it the blighted conditions, or is it the authorized public use, or is it something, maybe you know of something different from the Economic Development Authority area of the statutes that would apply more appropriately?
Thank you for that question. At this point, our intention is not to acquire it for an authorized public use as stated in statute. And I have spoken with our city attorney relative to the statutes and the ability for us to acquire this property. He believes that, I was looking for his email here. He believes that there is a section of statute that allows the transfer to take place with no financial costs for economic development. And I know that he had cited that, I'm sure it's section 492, because all economic development stuff is, but
That would be the theory that you believe you're advancing.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, and I know we may have to write a resolution from the county board, and I want to make sure that is drafted appropriately if this board wishes to adopt your request. So maybe if...
And I'd be happy to provide that
Sure.
email from John Shockley, our city attorney,
Very good.
citing that specific statute.
Just if the board could keep that in mind, if there is a adoption of this recommendation, to have that conditional on my review and drafting of an appropriate resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because this particular property takes up a good deal of Main Street space in downtown Barnesville, it has become quite blighted, and I think for future economic development growth, it would be quite important to renovate that through the appropriate venue, and I think having the city of Barnesville may be the right choice on this one.
Just to follow up on that comment, the city and my office are often approached by residents saying, why isn't there a business or something happening with that building? And what the general public, often does not understand is that when it's in private hands, we have no control. So the only controls that we have are through the tax forfeit process, or if it becomes neglected under our property maintenance ordinance, we will address that, and we have on this particular property. But the fines that we assess via our property maintenance ordinance are no different than the taxes that you folks charge. They don't pay them. So we use every tool that we have in our toolbox, but you're exactly right that because of the location, the public actually expects us to get involved and do something about this.
Okay.
Because of the location, I feel strongly in this, and so I will motion to approve the request for conveyance of this property, contingent on Jenny's approval of the resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it.
I'll get you that information this morning.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much.
Before you leave, too, I might say, Karen, what a fabulous weekend for Potato Days.
Yes, it was wonderful. The
Yep.
weather was good. We had huge crowds. I was talking with the executive director yesterday, and she said that all the numbers were up in terms of participation in all the events. So, thank you.
Congratulations.
County Engineer's Office. Good morning, gentlemen. First item is approval to fill motor grader position.
Well, I would have to say I'm hoping we're over halfway through kind of a term in our of our life with the retirements and things, so this is directly due to another retirement. It's our Uland District motor grader. And the way it's kind of been is, you know, we do an internal posting first, and then depending on how that shapes up. So I think in the past, based on your guys' wishes, we'd like to do a kind of a approval to fill this position. And we would advertise for 5 days internally to see if somebody wishes to take the position, and you know, maybe a truck driver moves in there, and then we actually need to backfill a truck driver and so forth. But that's kind of what we're looking for, is to get approval to basically replace the retirement.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Item number 2 is our little recap of our bonding program. You know, we did this 3 years ago. We bonded for $10.5 million. And what we essentially did is we accelerated our 5-year road plan plus. You know, we actually, wouldn't you say anything? We actually accelerated more than just.
It was about 6 years worth of work.
Yeah. We did that in over the course of 3 years. We got an exceptionally good interest rate on our loan. And then the plan for repayment was using our state aid allotment over the next 5 or 6 years to make the payment back. So the question from the Highway Committee was, you know, how did we do? Did we do a good job? And Nathan put together a spreadsheet. Does everybody have a copy of that? Mm-hmm. Essentially, I think we kind of tried to, you know, we tried to target what's real and how things really went. And one of the things is acceleration, so you're saving on inflation. So I think we kind of targeted that, as well as economies of scale, you know, big projects. The other thing would be is mobilization, you know. I mean, if you come in and do 5 projects in 5 years or 1 project in 5 years, you save on that moving in, moving out, which is, you know, I don't know, maybe a 10% or so. It's a significant part of your overall bid. So maybe I'll just let Nathan kind of go through that. He gave a little demonstration to our Highway Committee, and they wanted to share it to the full board so we could all see kind of how it turned out.
If you take a look at the spreadsheet, looking at the 2013 bonding projects, the first project on there is County 17. This is a good example. We accelerated it 1 year. Our engineer's estimate at the time was about $1.5 million. The inflation savings there is based on 4% annual inflation per year. In the construction industry, that is pretty typical. You know, our inflation for construction isn't tied to a lot of the other inflationary indexes that are used out there for consumer goods and agricultural inflation. It's construction inflation. It's steel, it's oil, it's labor costs, and a lot of fuel costs. So that's where the 4% comes from, and I got that straight from Minnesota Department of Transportation's Office of Budget and Administration. The next column over there talks about project scale savings, and like Dave mentioned, when we're able to combine several similar types of projects together, we get kind of a Walmart effect for our projects. We're able to buy in bulk. We reduce the number of times the contractor has to bring their equipment in, bring it out, and then how much material they can put up at one time to make the product versus having to come in and make that product several different times. In talking with the asphalt industry and other industries, we talked to them about how much could we save if we had 3 or 4 projects that were, you know, smaller in scale, if we could, you know, make that into one larger project. And the numbers they threw out there, as listed in the double asterisk below, was about $2.50 a ton for each ton of asphalt. And then also, you know, the additional decrease in number of mobilizations in and out, and then increased efficiency in production of their aggregate, and then just the ability to pave higher volumes and be at one site and know that they're going to be at one site for a longer duration. It saves them a lot of money in doing their work. So we move forward with that, you know, looking at what we were looking at for savings. The next column over is a total estimated cost without bonding. So if you took those savings that we had originally forecasted out, our new engineer's estimate would have been about $1.66 million. On this project, when we bid it, and then after the final construction was done, the total cost of it was $1.43 million. So there was more savings on there than we even had anticipated when we originally put our estimate together. The next project down, you can see there was similar savings, and actually even more than what was shown on the project above. Of course, it was a larger project, which results in greater savings. The third project on the list, we didn't do any acceleration. That's when we planned on doing the work. So there was no acceleration on that one. The project scale savings, because of the asphalt again and the reduced mobilizations, was estimated at $50,000, and it came in even significantly less than that. So if you take a look at what our estimated savings in 2013, we were looking at about $423,000, and the actual was about $1.43 million. And if you guys who were there when we opened bids in 2013, we did see $1 million savings on our engineer's estimate. We just about fell out of our chairs. We couldn't believe how good of a price we got at that time. And we stayed consistent during construction, and we didn't have a lot of cost overruns, and we were able to see that all the way through the completion of the project. So that's where that $1.43 million came in. 2014, very similar to 2013. That year we had less economy of scale savings because we were doing 5-mile grading jobs. And when you're doing a 5-mile grading job, that's already about as big as you need to be to get big players in here to do the work. That's already a Walmart-sized project, using that term. The project on 3, unfortunately, we weren't able to really tie that into anything else. It wasn't able to go in with the other projects that were involved in paving. It was kind of a standalone, so we didn't see as much savings on that one as we would have liked. But
Was that our share of that project?
it was, yes. Yep. So you can see in 2014, we were a little closer to our estimated versus actual. We estimated 366, and it came in at approximately 400,000. So, the third year, again, a lot of the same things. We had 2 very large paving projects. Again, varying amounts of acceleration on those projects. The first project on 18, we didn't have any inflation savings, because that's when we were planning on doing that project in 2015. But the economy of scale on those projects was significant because of how much we were able to put together in one shot. So if you take a look at the bottom lines down there, we had our total estimated savings. We were looking at about $2.2 million, and our total actual savings ended up being about $3.3 million. You can see down on the bottom. And then, we needed to take a look at what were our actual costs. How much did this program actually cost us? And down in the bottom left corner, we've highlighted the bonding cost. The first item is the interest. Of course, we had $400,000 in interest cost. Underwriter's discount, another underwriter fee, $24,000, $62,000 in bonding fees to just put the bond together itself, and then $24,000 for Ellers to manage our investments, manage the bond funds before we were able to actually use them. And then, of course, we did earn interest on the bond funds before they were used, because Ellers was investing them for us, and that was the $150,000 that's listed down there. So when you add that all up, the bond cost was approximately $376,000. We anticipated originally it being closer to $500,000, so there was some savings in that as well. Part of that may have been just because we were neglecting the interest on the bond itself. So in the middle of the page there, you can see our estimated net savings. We had about $1.8 million estimated when we put the bonding package together and originally presented it to the board. What we're looking at now was actually closer to $2.9 million. So, and to put that into perspective, that is essentially 1 year's worth of our regular state aid allotment. So we were very pleased with how it turned out. It was a lot of work to put together. You know, we had some help from Wilkin County and staffing. Our staff did a lot of work to deliver these projects, and they did a great job doing it. And I think, you know, the $2.9 million in savings it turned out better than we ever anticipated.
Excellent, yes, good news. Kevin?
Yeah, when we first, we'd been talking about this for many years.
5 years?
To try this approach, and, you know, when it was stated, we anticipated probably seeing a $1 million savings on this. And to see these numbers, and these numbers aren't just fudged to make it look good. These are real things that really happen.
I did want to note that, you know, we could have put a little more acceleration numbers on there. We could put more inflation numbers, and we didn't. We tried to keep them as true as we could to paint the correct picture.
Yeah. And then there's some other underlying things that I still think we benefited from too. Obviously, there was an escalation in how quickly these projects were done, which, as Nathan mentioned, really added to the workload of the staff to get them done in time. But with these projects done now, you know, that we would have normally taken 6 years to do, I think there's been some underlying advantages by your staff once these have been done to start preparing and doing other things for the county in terms of highway work and so on and so forth. And hopefully now they're in the process of getting things ready to be shovel ready for when this.
Absolutely.
I think this county board, in a couple of years from now, when we're getting ready to make this last payment on this one, should really be strongly looking at doing the same thing again. Because obviously when you start seeing it's to the benefit of all the residents of Clay County when you start seeing a $2.8 million savings by accomplishing projects in 3 years instead of 6. Just that fact alone, you've improved all of those things that we worked on 3 years early, in let alone saving money. So it's, I'm really pleased that this worked out.
Kenny?
I think it's important to put it in perspective, just like you said, to save $2.8 million sometimes seems like a lofty number, but to compare it to the project cost for the old 52 project was $2.7 million. So I think it was a lot of work, and I applaud your staff for their very hard work, and I think it definitely paid off.
Great work, Dave, Nathan. Excellent. Appreciate it.
I know I've been having a lot of people come in recently, and I think we're already generating, you know, if we do look at something like this in the future, our list is already filling up. There's not a shortage of places to go next time, that's for sure.
Good.
Yeah, we're not suggesting that our work is complete.
Yeah, true.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Budget update. Firstly.
Morning again, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on Dave and Nathan's note, it was interesting, and you guys thanked them appropriately, but they really did put a lot of work into the planning of this, not just the implementation of it, but I remember some of the first meetings that we had in regards to the bonding issue. It was, and pardon my expression, but it was, hell no, we're not going to bond. It was, let's look at it. It was a different time, and the economy was really in the pits, and it was a tough time to look at doing something like this. And the two commissioners on that really stepped up and said, no, this is the right time to do it. And Dave and Nathan kept putting together figures and putting together figures, and this really turned out well. So it's really a compliment to this board to step up. There's not a lot of counties that were bonding. 1 or 2 is all. And I think we
Just,
heard.
I did want to mention to that too, and I think our former colleague, John Everett, was instrumental in helping us. You know, through our highway tracking committee, he was right there in understanding the benefits that this could have,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it's, when you look back and think about that, and like I said, we've had several questions, I'm sure you have too from other commissioners that said, you guys bonded up there, didn't you? How'd that work out? Because it hasn't been done a great deal, and it really worked out well, so a compliment to you folks for doing that.
After that was done, at some of the AMC functions I was at, I was asked the same thing by several commissioners. How did that bonding thing work for you in escalating those projects?
Yeah, yeah.
And at that time, I wasn't able to tell them that was a $2.8 million savings, but
Well, you didn't
I
know
told them
at
it was
that time.
significant.
Yeah, that's right.
That might be something at the AMC conference, they'd like to see a presentation on that to see how it worked out, so.
Maybe to the highway committee anyway.
Yeah, it would. Well, if we can get going on the budget update, possibly refer you to the memo first, and we'll kind of run through that just a little bit. What we did this week, Lori and I, we went back to the budget at your request and guidance, and what we took was kind of, we looked at the items that were in excess of a 3% increase and reviewed those again. If you'll see, motor vehicle is up on expenses to 6.4, but revenues are up 4%, and you know the business out there, which is very positive. The assessors, again, on paper, was up 5.76%, and that's because of a new camera system, and we're overlapping on service charges for a year, so that's why that's a little higher than normal. Information services, they were up 4.10%. We talked with Mark. Mark had added a little more for his part-time help of $1,840. That has been removed from the budget. And also, he had increased the software budget line of $2,500. And after discussions with him, he feels that he can remove that $2,500 to the budget. So that is out of the figures that you have there. Veteran services, we talked about that when we reviewed the budget the other week. And that was an upgrade in personnel that pushed it over that 3% mark. Planning and zoning, I talked about that on the aquatic invasive species. It was revenue in and expenses out on that. Environmental services, that was up 9.3%. We relooked at their budget. They had eliminated a $10,000 revenue source, and actually there had been some adjustments to another line item of revenue source that increased the revenue $4,700, so that helps the picture. Plus the expenses in the vehicle maintenance, Bruce had put in $1,950, and they do plan with your approval to purchase a new vehicle, so that will be taken out of there. And then there was an adjustment in a salary line item that reduced the cost $1,093. So environmental service, it was a savings with increased revenue and reduced expenditures of $7,743, which for a small department, that was really a big help. The sheriff's office, I just wanted to touch that percentage. It was 6% increase. That was outside of you adding the position, but, and the sheriff's office explained this to you, the expenses were up $137,000, but the revenues are up over $98,000. And if you remember, they said they were going to handle the expenditures for towing or for impounds, that they will be the financial unit to flow through instead of having the independent tow driver collect the fees. The sheriff's office will collect the fees and pay. So that expense is up, but yet so is the revenue in regards to that. Corrections, that was a big increase. You're well aware of that. It was prisoner health costs were up as well as the boarding outside. And you have more population, you're going to have more costs. That's just the way it is. So you're aware of that. Metro COG, We discussed that at the last meeting, the increases in programs, and you're all in support of that. The Greater Fargo-Moorhead Economic Development Commission, that was a 14.29% increase, going from $87,500 to $100,000 a year. They had not had an increase for some time, but what I'm suggesting here is, if we're trying to keep a lower percentage on that, is a reduction of $7,500 to their request, leaving a $5,000 increase in their budget. Would still, if you do that over a couple of years, it would bring it up there too. That's for you guys to decide, just a suggestion to you on it. The county fair had a 17.7% increase. They had requested $2,000 or $4,000 increase, from $21,000 to $25,000. And then we pay also the liability insurance, which runs around $2,000 a year. Again, if you want to graduate that, if you reduce the increase from $4,000 to $2,000, if you want to consider that, that's in this proposal right now. But it would still be going from $21,000 to them to $23,000, which is a pretty good percentage increase, and I'm sure they'd be understanding over the next 2 years, but your folks' decision. Senior coordinator position, that was an increase of 4% this year, and that's strictly the personnel pass-through of Dale Raleigh's position, and the percentage that you pay on that, we didn't make a recommendation on that one. West Central Initiative, you've been at $15,000 request from them for some years. And what happens there is $8,000 goes to West Central Initiative and $7,000 goes to the revolving loan fund. Your county revolving loan fund was, I think the balance is $324,000 in there, and we haven't had a request this year. Yeah. So you have a substantial balance in that.
It just doesn't make sense to keep putting
money there. Money in there
if they're not even actively wanting to pursue it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I mean, I think we need to do better at letting people know the availability of it. Somehow I don't know how we can do that. But.
Yeah, I don't either. Every time we meet, it seems like Commissioner Gross, we have talked about that. They have handouts at the banks. They let the economic development coordinators, the committees know. And, when money is as cheap as it is, I guess they go to the banks, and this is kind of I think there's a maximum cap on these of $20,000 as well.
But for the small entrepreneur, that's
a lot of money.
Significant.
It helps for inventory or something like this, but
also if there's a cap at $20,000.
I believe so,
and
yes.
There's a balance of $324,000. If we have nobody that's applying for this, it will take a significant amount of time.
It would take a long time. Yeah.
Generate enough interest in this, and so I think it may be appropriate to not continue to
I agree.
stuff the bank.
I definitely agree.
And I have to follow up with this. When Vicki looks at the balance of $324, she said, "Why are you contributing another $7,000 to this?" So this is her idea, to reduce the $7,000 again. So saves me again.
Thanks for watching.
That's right. She said, "No, just shove that over into my wages, we'll be okay."
Mm-hmm.
No, she didn't say that part.
That wasn't part of your recommendation.
That wasn't part of it. If we will just turn then to the summary, if you would. And you certainly don't have to act on these. You can talk about them or do whatever you want. But what I guess I wanted to show you now, this is the tax summary as it sits, with no fund balance or anything along those lines. And you will see that none of these individual funds, if you want to start out the general revenue fund, that's up 4%, but that also includes that $503,000 insurance increase. So even with that, that'll be spread amongst the different funds. Road and Bridge has seen a very limited increase of 1.73. The building fund, the only reason why that percentage is so high, you're starting with a low volume, and you, through resolution, agreed to add $50,000 to that for the jail funding part of it. The library's request wasn't excessive this year. You can see them all. Social services, and again, Rhonda always wants me to remind you that 5.84% included the $200,000 in there, that if you were to take that $200,000 out of that equation, she'd be down in the 2.5% to 3% as well. So none of your different categories are requesting a lot of increase. The general revenue fund was the biggest one, and you know where that came from, and that was public safety. County Attorney's Office, the jail, the Sheriff's Office, lots of additional dollars there. And of course, they are included in the new request. I won't say as well, because that's a separate issue. But anyway, you see where you're at with the total levy, spread levy of 7.16 and new construction of 1.86, which leaves a net levy of 5.3. And I think I've always had a little problem on the new construction, but frankly, the new construction is paying part of the increase. So what's left behind when we talk about the net increase is what the current homeowner has and what increase they will see. And then, of course, it's on the spread levy, and that's going to vary again. Hopefully, the farm property, the valuations have come down just slightly. At least they've leveled off. So
There'll be a little bit more of a shift again.
yeah, it'll be a shift.
A slight shift, but.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
In regards to the new construction, the dollars that we committed to the incentive package, we have those dollars built in on the expense side in our budget, don't we?
We did, but we removed those early on. So we're just estimating around $200,000 that we had in the budget initially, but we've removed.
But they're not
those.
in this budget now?
No, they're not anymore.
But we still have to pay that.
Yes, we do.
So it should be in the budget.
It was.
Well, why isn't it now?
Well, last year you guys suggested removing it. And about 2-3 weeks ago, we removed that $200,000, and you're going to rely on reserves to cover.
Okay, all right, well, okay.
Because you decided that the growth was going to offset those.
But I don't,
reserve savings at some point.
I still think it would be wise for us to show it as an expense line item in our budget. But just understanding that the offset in compensation, or the offset in revenue is going to be reserves.
Right.
But to not show a $200,000 expenditure on our budget line item, I think we're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, I can certainly add it back
But
in.
would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so technically, until we make a decision, so now when you get into these other ones, so this 5.3, we would have to take reserves out just to still cover that then, that 200,000.
At this, with the 5.3, if we add that back in, we would.
Okay. Which to offset, you'd have to do that.
Right.
So these numbers here, to get to these numbers now, it would actually be another 200,000 on top of the 4 and the 6.
If you add that in on the expense side, you're going to have to balance it out.
Well, because if we're planning on using reserves, that's what these are going to do too.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
I just want the board to understand that, because this really isn't 5.3 unless we also say that we're using 200,000
Of
on
fund
this one of fund balances.
Correct, yep.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. And now, so Lori, is it starting next year now? We gain the revenues of the first ones that came on.
For payable, yes, so 14 and 15, and so those 14 ones will be coming back on as paying taxes in 16.
Yeah, so we'll see some benefit there too.
Right.
So at some point, because the 200,000 was really 2 years worth.
Yes, yep.
But assuming we're going to continue that, it will probably always maintain that 2
It
years
should be
behind.
pretty consistent, I would think.
Pretty consistent. So that's why I think it would be good for us, then we're just budgeting that line item, and then how we go about raising the revenue, it's either, you have your, we can, the history is going to show that we used reserves in the past to cover it. And,
Right. Yep.
Future boards can determine what they want to do.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions on that? Okay. Then probably the next sheet that you might want to look at, because you have talked about this, are your fund balances. And I know last time Commissioner Campbell did talk about revenues over expenditures from last year, and they do become part of the fund balance. So whether you use 1 year of revenues over expenditures or you look at what your fund balances are both essentially correct in how you want to do that. What you have done so far is, if you look at the fund balance statement there, the $430,000 under public health, that has already been credited, and that has been a standing practice for before I got here, is that the revenues over expenditures from the year before have been credited to the next year. So that has already been done. And then what...
so that 430 is up here?
That's already been
It got-
applied.
It got removed from the general revenue fund, their request from the general revenue fund. So their initial request was 800,000 something, so we reduced it by that.
And again, that's been the practice for some time. The next two line items, or the two columns that you may want to consider, last year, you'll see what I highlighted there. Your revenues over expenditures in the general fund were $1.4 million last year, and in your social services was $900,000. And if you remember right, we did have some additional dollars come in from, won't say revenues, meaning that means earnings or unexpected revenues, but we had paid out for flood buyouts. We were reimbursed our final payments on that last year. So that's an extraordinary amount of revenue over expenditures for last year, I think. And it was the same with social services. We had a payment after the first of the year that was delayed that increased the amount. But nonetheless, your fund balances are sitting pretty good in your general and your social services. Also, I think Commissioner Campbell pointed out last time when we did the update for 2015 that our expenditures are running about 2 or 3% behind the budgeted amount, which would indicate some revenues over reserves that are happening in 2015. Yeah, 5%, was that what it was? Okay. So with that, I've handed you out, and I knew you wanted to discuss this issue, but so I've handed you out a couple other updated sheets. And one is for a $400,000 reduction in fund balances. You have those in front of you. And I've got $400,000 up in the corner. If you were to do what you did last year, you took an additional $400,000 out of fund balances. And that's what you applied to the levy last year. If you were going to do that this year, because, and I think I'm going to defend Commissioner Campbell's position on this, and he can do it himself, I know that.
I'm ready.
But when the revenues are coming in over expenditures, it's okay to apply that, and you keep your balance in your fund reserves. So it isn't like you're reducing your fund balances, you're using revenues from one year over the other to keep your levy conservative.
Our goal, when we set our budget, is to hopefully raise revenue to cover the cost of operations of our county. That's assuming you have adequate fund balances. Let me give you an example. I think when after my first couple years on this board, the fund balance in social services was down to $1.5 million. Look at it today, it's almost $8.3 million. And you know what? We've raised that, and still we have not cut anything. We have not cut any services. We've just appropriately, I mean, what cuts have happened from the state, not from the county. So, because our services have increased. If you take a look historically at the social service line item, here it's 5.84%, and every year it's a number similar to that. But, you know, I just think when we say we're taking it from reserves, I don't even like to call it that. I like to call it that we overcharged our taxpayers, and let's give them credit for it. There's a difference in those two things. Certainly, the revenues over expenditures go to reserves, but it's, you know, it's unintended. When we put the 1.5 million into reserves at the start of 2014, we didn't expect that to be there. We expected it to be needed to cover the costs. So, you know, I'm confident in, the only thing is these two, again, I need to, board members, you see the 400 and the 600 here. They would really be 600 and 800 if we put that $200,000 line item back in, okay? Just so which I think for future boards and for historical purposes, we really should do it that way. We should have a line item that says we paid out to this incentive program $200,000 in expense. And then our theory for, rather than raising taxes to the public, we're saying we've been able, through our revenues over expenditures, to keep that in check. So I know we're coming up on September 30th is when we have to, you know, and I certainly like the idea where we're getting below 4. I think we talked about that. You know, when you take a look at what else is being proposed out in Clay County from other entities, I think it's important that you know, we do our best to hold our own. And we're going to have our jail issue. It's going to be a big one coming up. And but I like the direction this is going. I really do. Well, compared to that first go around, I don't know if this, I think 12.
Yeah. Well.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a comment. As you're aware, I've never really been in favor of using fund balances for operating expenses. I mean, I've been okay with capital expenditures and that sort of thing, but now I actually do feel comfortable using fund balance. Our trend has been that we've been revenues over expenditures. We have a substantial fund balance now. Before, we were just teetering on the edge of, you know, being okay, but I feel we have an adequate fund balance, so I'm actually comfortable with using fund balances this year.
Even in our exit interview with our state auditors, they've mentioned that we are really close to their guidelines, and their guidelines exclude our internal service fund.
Right.
So we are in good shape. I look historically at this, and I see us. I mean, there was a year there where we were closer to 3 million revenues over expenditures, and you know, so why would the next year we even want to ask for more money from our residents? And we're still getting the job done. That's the key. So anyway, this is good.
Well, okay. So remember the balancing on the 200,000, putting that back in, but so there's 200,000 going out of the reserves. And we did the same thing last year. So, and the first sheet that you show with the 400,000, that's what you did last year. We did have increased revenues over expenditures from last year. So we have printed you out a $600,000 revenue over fund balances, or over expenditures. We'll stay on the same, try to stay on the same terminology. So, and Lori and I discussed this, and she's okay with this too, going to the 600. And as you can tell, she'll tell you if she's uncomfortable with it. She does me. But if you want to take a look at that one, did I give you that? Then you're at the net spread levy and of 4.86, and with the new construction, you're down at a net levy increase of 3%. Now, where you want to go from that is your folks certainly.
I'd just like to throw this out here. You know, when we look at the rules that we're under, we have to set our preliminary levy at the end of September. And once that's set, we can go down, but we can't go up.
That's correct.
And we have been looking now at, and we're saying, boy, we're looking at revenues over expenditures of $1.5 million for 14. What's important that I think we need to look at and be able to do again closer to the end of 15 will be to see what really is trending at that point in time for 15. We want to make sure that we would still be trending those revenues over, which I think we are, because we clearly on the expense side we're hanging in there, and we were actually, you know, seeing probably a 5% benefit on the revenue side. But, you know, so going into the end of this month, whether we want to do this number, or we could take the cautious approach and do the 400, knowing we can still come down. Because it's still, I think it's still important to be taking a look at what really is happening in 2015, not 2 years back, right? Would you,
Correct,
what do you think of that, Lori?
Absolutely, yeah.
But you do take that information into account now. I mean, it's not like we're not taking the first 8 months of 2015. I mean, we're on track, correct?
Yes, we're taking that information into account now, but then we still have a few months left in case there's something that happens, just to make sure and verify those numbers as well as the revenues coming in.
Right. And I fully anticipate we're going to see revenues over expenditures again. We have every year since I've been here.
Okay, any other questions right now? Looking good, so far so good.
And I guess I know you will want us to continue to look at the current budgets for any reductions. I guess if you look back over the last 3-4 weeks and the reductions that we've brought into you, we've cut some positions, we've reduced them to half positions, we've done this, done that. And that's why we went back and looked at all of the budgets to see where their percentage increases were. And if you have other suggestions that you would like us to look at, please don't hesitate to send an email or come in and discuss it or whatever, and that sure helps. That's what brought about some of these other reductions, is your input to me, even outside of this boardroom when you
Lori, your addition of the staff in motor vehicle.
Right.
Did we incorporate revenue increases?
We've added some increased
in-
revenues in motor vehicle because our transaction numbers keep going up, so we do have a
Okay.
little bit of an increase.
Adding another person won't necessarily increase the transaction numbers.
Not
It'll probably
necessarily.
reduce the workload of the others.
It'll help with the line, the 30
Right,
people staff.
right. It'll be more of a convenience to our residents who are,
customers, yeah.
the customers who come in. But we won't really see revenues increases because of that.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, okay. Good.
Mr. Chair, if I may on that, I think that is the correct answer, although I will have people say, I go to Holly where I don't have to stand in line.
Yeah, but we still get the revenue.
No, we don't.
From Holly, we don't get the revenue?
No.
No. That's the city takes care of that.
Oh.
So if you do provide a better, more efficient service locally,
Okay.
you may increase your service fees some.
Oh, okay.
So,
I'd have to agree with that, I think too, you know, because that word spreads fast, you know.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You have to.
Well, then there's some that are just doing it all online too.
For the tab part.
The tab part, yeah.
Tabs, yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee reports, Wayne.
On Thursday, August 27th, Family Health Care. General business, there was a report on refugee health. Most of the refugees who have arrived in our area are from Somalia, Bhutan, and Iraq. And there was a technology update. This included documents and patient information. Official accreditation report. This has a lot to do with government requirements and possible oversights that might have occurred. The chief financial officer went over the contracted programs that Family Health Care deals with. And then we submitted the federal grant renewal for the Family Health Care budget. There was a treasurer's report, the operations report, and then the CEO's report, and contained a review with the family health care's bylaws. And that's the only meeting I had.
Thank you, Frank.
Thursday morning, I went to a legislative session with Senator Eakin and Representative Margaret Lean with the nonprofits. They had nonprofits got together and talked to these guys, and they came up with some very good ideas, where they said the legislative, they increased the minimum wage, but the funds going to the nonprofits did not increase. So they're really starting to hurt a little bit, because, it didn't work. It's another one of those mandates, almost like a mandate. You pay your people more, but you're not giving us more money. And that was an interesting point. Senator Eakin is looking at introducing a constitutional amendment, just like transportation. There's a constitutional amendment. We put so much money into transportation every year. And he's looking at trying to introduce a constitutional amendment to dedicate funds to nursing homes. So preschool, even the school, they're looking at when should you start with infants. They went to kindergarten, and now they're looking at pre, and some of them are saying you should start with infants, right when they were born, as far as the more you can do to recognize there's a problem with a child, the earlier you can do it, the more money you're going to save later on in life, so that's another thing they're looking at. And I guess after I got done with the session, I was looking, what are we doing for the workers in them? These nonprofit agencies, they're all saying it. They need more money to help out these people, the children, the senior citizens, but I'm looking, what are we doing to help out the workers that are doing this, that are running these nonprofits, so I think that's also an important thing we have to do. Thursday night, I went to the Buffalo River Watershed Board. They had a hearing on Ditch 51 up there by the Cragness area. I was almost watching like a TV movie there. They had two lawyers presenting their cases, and they did a heck of a job there, presenting. I didn't know who I was going to vote, who I'd vote for after that presentation. It was a very good presentation by two lawyers there, and then seems strange, neighbors can't work things out, but I guess that's why lawyers got to have a job, It's just, it was a very good presentation there, and they have a good. They have a tough decision to make. Friday morning with Felton Prairies. Boy, I learned a lot about flowers and butterflies and fens, and that I never knew before, And sometime, I don't know, it was this spring there, we had this lease program for the Felton Prairie, and I wasn't quite satisfied with that. And I learned a lot about, what should we do with this 500 acres up there, and I think we have to make a decision there, whether we sell this land to the DNR or not, or the. They gave a good presentation on it. I think we need to have further discussion on that, on those 500 acres, and I think they have a good plan for it, So I know there's some people up there that want haying rights and stuff like that for it, but it's not that they're going to be taken away. They're still going to be there. Those are the ones I had.
Thank you. Jenny?
I did want to mention I wasn't able to make the watershed board meeting the Buffalo Red watershed last Monday, but they did decide to not join the Red River board. They've been discussing that for a number of years, rejoining, and now doesn't seem like an appropriate time for them just because of the amount of costs that will be added onto the tax statements. So just wanted to share that with you. I attended the Lakes and Prairies Community Action Meeting in Breckenridge last Thursday. Great presentation on the spotlight of the Child Care Aware program. There's an enormous amount of children that can benefit by that program for their child care. There was a presentation on the Head Start, the children that were served in 2014-2015 in Clay County. There were 268 children in Clay County served by the Head Start program, so that continues to be a great program. And then I also attended the Felton Prairie meeting with members of the DNR, and I appreciate them coming to present to us, and I would like to see us discuss that at a future board meeting. That's all I had.
Thank you. Kevin?
Okay, last week we had a PIC meeting after our board meeting, and that was primarily we need to talk about some issues in regards to the detox center and the staffing there, and I think part of that came to light today on the resignation. Then on Wednesday, we had a Prairie Lakes Board meeting in Perham. That was a pretty significant, very long meeting. And we did go through the budget. I had served on that budget committee for the first time for them, and the previous year they had they're early on in this operation with this new boiler, and they really miscalculated a lot of things, and they ended up with this significantly, unlike what we had here with revenues over expenditures, they had expenditures over revenues by $1.7 million for 1 year. And of course, we're now members of that, and I had real concern about, okay, are they going to be coming to all member counties and saying, okay, you got to chip in? And so when I met with the budget committee, this will take a couple minutes, but this is very important for Clay County that everybody know this. I said, well, the first thing we got to do is solve the 2016 budget so that we don't have the same thing repeat again, you know, because that's ongoing. And so what ended up happening in looking at all of our expenditures, we recommended, and it was approved at our board meeting Wednesday, an increase in tipping fees from $84 to $94.50 to raise the appropriate revenue to. Now, part of that was, and I also then suggested and made the motion that $1 of that tipping fee increase would automatically go to repay Otter Tail County for the deficit that was that we had for last year. And they have agreed to carry that over time, kind of like what Clay County did with our regional juvenile center when we were behind, when we had we were in the same boat, and member counties agreed. So we have basically $60-some thousand set aside in the budget to repay every year. Plus, we have a situation in place, or policy in place, where if there are revenues over expenditures, which we'd like to get to, that 50% of those revenues over expenditures will first go to repay Otter Tail County as well. And part of our problem right now is with oil prices are so low right now, and gas prices where they are, they really dictate the revenues, because of what we have to pay for the portion of fuel that we end up having to use. But the minute those things start going up again, that's going to be a benefit to the facility, and hopefully that'll help raise the revenues. So that was the primary issue there. And then we are still into this, I was added to the arbitration panel that's going on with the, so I'm going to be spending some time, I think, in...
What arbitration panel?
This has to do with the malfunction or of the new boiler system.
Okay.
And there's a significant problem there, and so we're going after the contractor, and so now the contractor's countersuing us. It's kind of ridiculous, but that's something that we had to be a lot behind. We were able to go into executive session on that stuff because of the legalities, so I can't get into too much of it. Then Thursday morning, we had our solid waste meeting, advisory committee meeting, and we decided, and Kirk had that out at the landfill, and we got a tour of the landfill again. It'd been a while since we had done that, and all seems to be going really well out there. It was a good thing for us to all get back out there again. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I had the PIC meeting and the Prairie public solid waste meeting, and Kevin already discussed those, so we'll move on to Brian. Anything for us, Brian?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And not too much. The PIC meeting was the first thing we held right after this board meeting, and that's already been covered, and the corrective action, or the awareness has been taken care of. A lot of budget work this week with Lori in regards to finalizing some things and following up on some things. We had a surveyor meeting. Mark will be bringing a recommendation of a selection of a survey company, or a company that will do surveying, act as our representative in regards to the surveys and do some corner work for us and things along those lines. So he'll be bringing that in. Had a conference call again on the diversion meeting. It's a kind of a strategy planning one with CH2M Hill. Took about 45 minutes on Friday, I guess. I had new hire orientation yesterday for a while. Spent a fair amount of time on the home buyouts again, moving right along. Boy, even after purchase agreements take place, there's a lot of things that need to be worked on in regards to titles, and when these people haven't been out of their ownership for 35, 40 years, there's a lot of changes in their life, and that needs to be brought up to date before you can. But we're hopefully closing on the first home today, and we've got several in the pipeline, as I've informed you about. And then this afternoon, it's just an awareness thing. I guess we're having a jail finance meeting. It's been kind of quiet since you approved the design of the jail, and that it was by design that things needed to kind of settle down a little bit and fall in place. But now we have to start concentrating on our financing of it, and when we bond and how we bond, because when we start purchasing these properties, we need to bring a resolution to you to endorse the purchase of those and include those in the future bonding for the jail. So we need to get very serious about a direction on that, which we will. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you, Brian. I think, Jenny, we're having that meeting at 2:30, and we're going to be talking about some future potential resolutions. Have you seen any of that documentation yet? Are you planning on, would you be able to be there?
I will be there, yeah.
Good.
I haven't seen the documentation yet.
That was what I wanted to know, that you're going to be able to be there. Good.
Tim, you have something for us?
Well, I'd just like to let you know that we have closed on our first of many houses on the 2 blocks to the north of us here today.
So we're new property owners then, so.
Yeah, then I gotta find somebody to mow lawns.
Yeah. You got some kids, Jenny, that
We'll mow over some rocks if you got.
Did they just get a big brand new mower?
They did.
There
I
you
don't know
go.
if I want it to be destroyed. But
That's good news, so things are moving ahead on the property acquisitions to the north, so.
By the end of November, actually one relatively soon, another by the end of November. A couple of them are gonna be longer term, so it'll be in the next year. But by the end of next summer, we should have all 6 of them south half over here.
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
news, thank you.
Good work.
Any other business today?